So first, let me ask you a question: how to approach a breast lump? Anybody, a patient comes to you in the OPD, what would you do? Patient comes and tell you that I have a lump in the breast. So what would be the first thing that you would like to do? Anybody? Yeah, if we want to summarize just in short, history taking, whatever further steps we'll do, there's a term that we call it specifically in breast lump. Correct. So what does the triple assessment consist of? Correct. So it's, like you said rightly, it's clinical assessment, it's imaging, and it's a tissue diagnosis. So if we talk about the clinical assessment, what all comes in the clinical assessment? Correct. So if we talk about clinical assessment, the most important is history. So history taking is the most important, like since first year, I think everybody has been telling you about history taking, and how important it is. So the first most important thing is age. So when we talk about a breast lump, why is age so important? Anybody? So age is very important because most of the time, usually, breast cancers are seen in the postmenopausal age group. But this was in a different era where a lot of diagnosis and screening was not available and genetic implications were not there. But now what we see a trend is, there's a trend where the age that we can see is mostly in the younger population as well. So since we have a habit of comparing everything with the Western population, so in the West it is mainly postmenopausal, but the trend in this Eastern part of the world is more going towards a younger population. Secondly, gender. Do you think gender is important in a breast lump? Correct. So there can be a male breast cancer as well. And what is the incidence of male breast cancer? It's very less. It's 1 to 2%. But when it is male breast cancer, it's usually the aggressive one because males don't have the breast tissue that the females have. So if it's a 2 centimeter tumor in a female, it will still be a T1 stage, which is a smaller one which is in the breast. But if it's a 2 centimeter tumor in a male, it immediately invades the skin and becomes T4B. So the male breast cancer is much more aggressive in terms of staging, but it is much less aggressive in terms of females. Also, most of the times, what we see is that the axillary involvement in male is usually less compared to females. So it's usually localized and does not go to the axilla. Any other demographic data you want to know about breast lump? Yes, correct. So you've very well read it. So Ashkenazi Jews have an implication of BRCA1 and BRCA2. So there is a compulsory genetic testing in Ashkenazi Jews where you need to do it. Though we don't find that population more in India. Indian demography is different from the outside world. So in case you get an Ashkenazi Jew, because I got an Ashkenazi Jew in my practice and I was quite shocked, the patient had come from a different country because she was all genes negative. But because she was an Ashkenazi Jew, she wanted a prophylactic mastectomy without any genetic pathogenic mutation. Okay, now presenting complaint with its duration, I think it's very important, all of us know. So the presenting complaint in case of a breast cancer and benign breast disease, what could it be if anybody can enumerate it? So the most common symptom is a breast lump, which could be of any size, any nipple discharge, which you have to be very careful. It has to be it has to be spontaneous and not on expression. So a lot of females will come to you and they will say that I'm having discharge from the nipple, but if you ask them further, they'll tell you that it's after pressing a lot because I had pain, I was pressing, it was coming. So that is usually benign. If it comes spontaneously, yes, it's very important. Again, if you talk about the nipple discharge, there are multiple types of nipple discharge. They can be serous, which would be somewhere around liquidy or yellowish color, milky, or it could be bloody. So the most dangerous one is the bloody one, because I'll go step by step. So the types of discharge is serous, milky, and bloody. If we talk about coming out from single duct or multi-duct, it could be both single duct or multi-duct. And the third question that you would ask whether it's on expression or it's on spontaneous. So usually the benign are serous, milky, multi-duct, and on expression. And usually the malignant ones are bloody, too serous, single duct, and comes that spontaneous. So if the patient is coming and telling you that I had pain and I had expressed it, please tell her to stop it, because the more she presses it, the more ductal ectasia, that is dilatation of the mammary ducts, will happen. So that is the second symptom, which is nipple discharge. The third symptom is if there is any kind of redness or rashes or ulceration over the breast. And the fourth most important is a lump in the axilla. So a lot of patients, they come only with a metastasis in the axilla and no primary in the breast. So a lump in the axilla also needs to be seen very carefully, whether it's a breast cancer, or the second diagnosis could be a lymphoma, and the third diagnosis could be a tuberculosis. So do not miss out a breast lump as breast cancer. It could be nipple discharge, any kind of changes in the breast that the patient is complaining, or any lump in the axilla. Any complaint that the patient is saying could be a very small complaint, could be nothing, could be just she's saying there's a dimpling in the skin, but do not ignore it. You have to properly examine it, get properly tested, because even right now at the age of 25 to 27, we are getting malignancies. So don't think that a 25-year-old lady who comes with a breast lump will either be just a fibroadenoma or a cyst. It could be malignancy. So you have to clinically properly examine it. So I think all questions of breast lump needs to be taken care of. When, as to how long it has been. Now suppose a patient says, I had a lump 2 years back. It was probably size of an orange, but now it has become the size of a pea sized. So on history taking only, you get a clue as to whether that lump was benign or malignant. Because a malignant lump would not shrink in size. It would always increase in size. It could be any cystic lesion, any infected cyst. It could be mastitis, which probably resolved on its own. So history taking gives you a clue as to where are you going next. It could be benign, it could be malignant, but it gives you a rough idea of benign to malignancy. Now pain is a very weird thing. So most of the patients of breast lump will come with pain to you. But pain, as you know, mastalgia is physiological. It is absolutely normal. Do not worry about pain. Patient comes with pain. In case of breast cancer with pain, it usually only occurs when it is in advanced stage, when the tumor has involved the skin or it has gone to the chest wall muscles. Tenderness is something that we elicit, and that is also not important for case of breast cancer. Like I said, change in size over time with menstruation, because mastalgia, cyclical mastalgia, is usually cyclical. That is, usually you will see that when the periods are about to come, patient complains of pain, but the moment the periods are over, the pain subsides. That is because of the change of estrogen and progesterone, because those receptors are also present in the breast parenchyma. And recent increase in size, definitely you need to clinically examine. Associated symptoms, like I said, discharge, swelling, skin changes, and yes, patient might complain of symptoms of metastatic disease. So what is the most common site of metastasis in breast cancer, if anybody knows? Anybody? So the two words that we talk when we talk about cancer: osteoblastic, osteoclastic. Bone, yeah. So if we talk about prostate and breast, the most common site of metastasis is bone. Now how to remember? Because breast already has B, so she does not need blastic, it needs lytic. So they have usually osteolytic lesions. Prostate has osteoblastic lesions. So the most common site is vertebra, but it is not like it only occurs in vertebra. You can also see in lungs, you can also see in liver. These are the most common site of metastasis. So the patient might complain of back pain, like ekdom shojjo kora jacche na, something like that. A lot of back pain. Okay, now gynecological history. Anyone knows what's the importance of gynecological history? Menstrual cycle, menarche, puberty. Anybody? Yes. Correct. Why? Correct. So if the patient has an early menarche, late menopause, or if the patient does not have any child, so the estrogen exposure in the body is more, and the patient has higher chance of getting a breast cancer. So in your book, read the risk factors for breast cancer, and out of these, this is one of the most important. Again, medical history. Medical history of benign breast cancer is not very important, but you need to know whether the patient underwent any lumpectomy outside, whether any reports were available, whether it was benign, it was malignant, any breast cancer history. And why are we talking about radiation history for the patient? Because radiation to chest wall is also one of the risk factors to cause breast cancer. Now, I think family history, all of us, you all are final year students, must be knowing that family history is extremely important for any breast cancer or any cancer as such, because it has been seen that a patient with first degree relative having breast cancer has a very high chance of getting breast cancer. But again, now you need to ask whether that first patient who got breast cancer, was it diagnosed at a younger age, was it diagnosed at an older age? Why we are asking this is because if it is diagnosed at an older age, so more than 60, more than 65 years, usually there is no genetic implications. But if the patient's mother or patient's brother, they were diagnosed at an early age, somewhere around 30 to 35, then they might have a very strong genetic predisposition. And nowadays, patients are very much opting for these genetic counselings and genetic testings. And breast does not only include BRCA1 and BRCA2, but there are multiple other high penetration genes which are very important. So, family history is extremely important, even if it is in the male counterparts of the family. Do not ignore it, because there is CDK4, there is STK4, there is CHEK2. So, all of them which is related to pancreatic CA, prostatic CA is also related to the part of the breast CA in females. Others, we know how obesity is affecting all the cancers. Then there is alcohol, diet, smoking. So you need to take all these histories as well. Like you said, age of menarche, age at first childbirth, menstruation history, any hormonal intake. So nowadays a lot of females are going for in vitro fertilization. So they are given a lot of hormones at a very short duration. So they end up getting a breast lump. So please take their any history of hormone replacement therapy, or if they're undergoing any IVF treatment. Age of menopause, like we said, history of cancer and breastfeeding. So there are few studies that show that breastfeeding do prevent some slight risk of breast cancer, but this does not mean that a girl, a female who has not breastfed will definitely have breast cancer. So you have to counsel the patient, because a lot of patients will come to you asking that I have not breastfed my child. So do I have a higher chance of having breast cancer? Should I get some tests done? So you have to tell them that yes, you have a little bit higher chance, but that is kind of negligible. So though there are studies that shows that when you breastfeed, the risk reduces, but this definitely does not mean that you will have cancer because you've not breastfed. Okay, now examination, anybody? How would you like to examine? I'll probably remove this slide. How would you like to examine the patient? Any one of you? Just it's not like you'll be penalized for not answering or for answering wrong. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And what is more important? What is, after taking a consent, what is a very important thing? Even before that, you have to call for a chaperone. Okay, you cannot examine the patient alone. Even for a female, examining a female, ideally you have to call a chaperone. You should not examine the patient alone. For males, it is extremely important, because I think the female patient will not let you touch also. In the presence of a chaperone, maybe she will, but medico-legally, you always have to have a chaperone next to you. If there is no chaperone, ask for a chaperone. If in the exam, obviously you will not have, but you have to tell the examiner that I would like to first call for a chaperone. Okay? After proper consent, you'll do the exposure. Now, what next will you do? Yes, absolutely. So you can always have the relative by your side, but if the chaperone is not there, do not examine. You tell the hospital authorities, I will not examine, I will not see the patient. Because at the end of the day, what matters is your medical legal safety as well. Nowadays, with so much, I would say, education, and it is good, the patients are quite conscious, they know what is happening, and even if you're not doing something, you might end up with something, a wrong allegation. So ask for a chaperone now. You've exposed the patient. How would you like to see the patient? Sitting or lying down, anybody? Sitting. Sitting, how would you like to see her? Yeah, so there are three positions: hand on your waist, hand above the shoulders, and hands next to your waist. Okay, so in these three different directions, we'll see the size. We'll see if the breasts are symmetrical in size, if we can see something obvious that is coming out of the breast, any discharge that is coming, any ulceration, anything that you find is not normal, we need to note it down. Now, why are we seeing it in these three different positions? Anybody? Yes, correct. So what happened? The pectoralis gets contracted, and therefore if there is a tumor that is attached to the pectoralis, you can see there is some animation or some movement on the breast, and you can see the lump also, probably, if it's big enough. When you raise it high above, then anything that is closer to the skin will be better visualized than what was being visualized with the hands by your side. So that is a clinical inspection that we do. Contour, asymmetry. Nipple areola complex is very important. NSE stands for nipple areola complex. You need to see whether the nipple is inverted, everted, whether it has been retracted towards one side. Because usually if there is a ductal involvement, the tumor usually retracts the nipple towards that particular side. Nipple, like I said, you have to check for any discharge, depression, asymmetry, any other lump in the vicinity that you see. And also when the patient is raising hand above, you also see about the axilla and the underarms, whether there's something that you can see over there. Regional lymph nodes will come. Okay, so I think now that was about the inspection part. Now, when we talk about palpation, how do we palpate? Sorry? Yes, but what else will you do? You'll divide the breast into 5 quadrants. Okay, so you make 2 vertical lines divided into 5 quadrants. The outer, so there becomes 2 upper outer quadrants and upper inner quadrant, a lower outer and a lower inner quadrant, and the 5th one is your nipple areola complex. So whenever you're checking, you have to check all the quadrants separately in a rotatory fashion, gently to deeper. And after that, you will always have to check for the underarms. Underarms, that is axilla. Now, when we go to the axilla, how many stations do we check in axilla? Anybody? So there are basically 5 stations. If we talk about it, we call it anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, and apex, which is medial. Okay. So these are the 5 places where we check for nodes. The nodes are checked in the same fashion. So the patient is sitting and the hand is usually kept on your shoulders, and that then we palpate and we check whether any node is palpable or not. If a node is not palpable, does not mean that the patient has a node negative breast cancer. It could be a node positive breast cancer. So the breast examination is done by dividing into 5 quadrants in 3 positions: hands by the side, hands by your waist, and hands above. The axilla is checked while the hands are on your shoulders. Keep it rested. It should not be taut, because then the pectoralis major will be contracted and you will not be able to see the nodes that is behind it. And anything else you would like to do? Do a rough general examination whether the liver is enlarged in size, check for any bony tenderness, check for lymphedema, because sometimes when the disease is very advanced and the tumor is engulfing the subclavian vein, the patient comes to you with grade 1, grade 2 lymphedema as well. So there are instances where you'll not find any lump in the breast, but you'll find a lump in the axilla that has led to lymphedema. So these are basically called an occult metastasis, where there is no primary in the breast, but the primary is only in the axilla. Okay, now so you've done the examination. What else would you like to do? I usually like to see the patient again in the lying down position, because that helps me check for the size. We'll note down the size, the boundaries of the tumor, whether you can see it's a very completely properly lobulated, well-defined margin, or whether it is an ill-defined margin. Sometimes you'll only see some vague nodularity, like we see in fibroadenosis. So that is nothing but breast parenchyma that we can see. So after this, what imaging would you like to do? Or, okay, let me tell you this. I think this I've already summarized how the nipple discharge is and what is common in what. So if you see a serous discharge, it is usually seen in a duct papilloma. If it's a clear discharge and the patient is expressing it, it is usually seen in duct ectasia. For duct ectasia, there is no treatment. You have to just tell the patient to stop expressing. If the prolactin is too high, you can just give cabergoline, otherwise nothing is required. Just assurance and counseling is sufficient. If it's a bloody discharge or a serous discharge, if it's coming from a single duct, it could be a intraductal papilloma. And a nipple ulceration and eczema can have multiple diagnoses. So if a patient comes to you with some ulceration only over the nipple, so it could be Paget's disease or it could be eczema. Would you confirm whether it's Paget's disease or eczema? No, not necessarily. So you can just do a small incision biopsy. Take the nipple part a little and take a small part of the skin, like a wedge biopsy, and send it for histopath and you'll get the report. Rest I think we have kind of covered. Yes, now when we talk about breast imaging, now we have examined the patient. Now suppose we have a 45-year-old lady, she comes to us with a breast lump. She has a 3 centimeter lump in the upper outer quadrant, which is not fixed to the skin, not fixed to the chest wall, and there were no nodes palpable in the axilla. So what would you do next? Clinically, it is hard. The margins are not well defined. Mammogram. Will only mammogram suffice? So a mammogram and an ultrasound. So a mammogram is always done with an ultrasound. A mammogram is always done with an ultrasound. Why? Because mammogram picks up the calcifications, tells you about the tumor, but an ultrasound will also tell you about the axillary lymph nodes, which mammogram tells us a little less. The ultrasound will not tell us about the calcifications that we can see, which is coming out of the tumor in different directions. But an ultrasound will be able to tell you any ductal pathology which mammogram will not be able to do. So if we divide it properly, mammogram tells us about the tumor, about the calcification and the extent of calcification. If the radiologist is really good, they'll be able to tell you about the nodal status as well in a mammogram. Or where on the contrary, in an ultrasound, you can visualize the tumor, measure the size, you can see the irregularities, whether it is connected to a duct, whether any other duct is communicating with it, the ductal extensions, and the most important, the axillary lymph nodes, whether it is pathological or whether it is normal. So if an ultrasound report is telling you that a few enlarged lymph nodes are seen, enlarged lymph nodes does not mean malignant lymph nodes. So when we are talking about malignant lymph nodes, what we will be seeing in an ultrasound is loss of hilum. You'll come to it later, maybe this is a little too advanced. Loss of fatty hilum and a thickened cortex will be something that we'll be able to see in the axillary lymph nodes. Now, if we talk about a mammogram, what all do you know about a mammogram? What exactly is a mammogram? What kind of imaging is it? X-ray. It is an X-ray of the breasts. Okay. So, it is usually done in two different views. The breasts are compressed in between two plates. Yeah, it's a craniocaudal and a mediolateral view. So the craniocaudal is where the X-ray shots are taken from the top and you get a view from the craniocaudal view, and in the mediolateral you get side to side view. So the axilla is usually visualized in the MLO view, which is a mediolateral view, and not in the craniocaudal view. There are few tumors that are missed on mammograms, those the tumors which are absolutely close to the inframammary fold, because it gets compressed in the craniocaudal view and it gets obscured in the mediolateral view. And if we find a tumor, suppose we find a screen detected 0.5 centimeter tumor or any other tumor, there's another view which is called a spot compression view, where what we do is we focus on that particular tumor to see how far those tumors are radiating out. So those tumors are usually like a spoke of a wheel and they juts out like the spokes of a wheel. There are multiple more views, but I think at your level just knowing these three views will be more than sufficient: CC, MLO and the spot compression view. Okay, now if anybody knows what is the screening criteria for mammogram. Now suppose a patient comes to you and she says, I have no breast complaints, but I want to get a screening done. So what would you like to do? A 25-year-old comes to you and wants to get a screening done. What would you tell her? Anybody? Would you offer a mammogram to her? Ultrasound. Then whom will you offer a mammogram to? So see, by standard it is taken as more than 40 years. There is no hard and fast rule, but less than 40 years it is not recommended because the breasts are usually very dense. The purpose of doing a mammogram is not achieved if we are doing is less than 40 years, because what we'll see just the breast parenchyma, which is like a white shadow, and we won't be able to see any calcifications. So if you want to go for a screening mammogram, do it only after 40 years. But if you diagnose a malignancy in even a 25-year-old, you need to do a mammogram, because that becomes your baseline mammogram. And then when the patient comes to you on follow-up, you need to correlate it with the different mammograms to see if there are more calcifications or not. So these are just some mammogram pointers. So these are how the tumors usually look on mammograms or an ultrasound. See, the A1 is a very well-defined, round-shaped. Usually this we see in benign cases like fibroadenoma or some cysts. So they're usually hypoechoic. When we see hypoechoic on ultrasound, they are darker and not whiter than the background image. So the one which is in the first A is usually most of the time benign, but never think that it is always benign. Some malignant tumors can also be this completely round shape. The B is an oval shape. B can also be a benign case most of the time, but could be malignant. And C is a lobulated one. So the most common place where you see a lobulated tumor, anybody? You're feeling it is lobulated. Ultrasound is also giving you a microlobulated. Phyllodes, yes. So fibroadenoma also gives you sometimes microlobulated, but phyllodes is the most common where you get lobulated tumors. Then these are all different kinds where the D irregular margins are there, E circumscribed, obscured, but I think D to I, most of them are more towards malignancy. So any these sort of images that you get on ultrasound or on mammogram, so these are mostly malignant. Yes, so now anybody knows about the BI-RADS classification? So when you do a breast ultrasound or you do a breast mammogram, on the impression, the radiologist writes BI-RADS 1, 2, 3, 4. Anybody has any idea about BI-RADS classification? This BIRATS classification. So this BIRATS classification is extremely important in breast. It was started with testes, which was TIRADS, and there is one more organ where we use this. Anybody? That is TIRADS, sorry, and there was one with penile also. Testicular we started, then it was thyroid, and there is one more organ where we use this classification. That is prostate, PIRADS. Okay. So BIRATS category is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this is radiologist dependent, it's a very user dependent scoring, but there are these international guidelines according to which they give this BIRATS classification. So if the radiologist has given a BIRATS 1 and 2, BIRATS 1 and 2 lumps are usually most of the time benign. BIRATS 1 is a normal breast, BIRATS 2 is benign. When we talk about BIRATS 3, which is probably benign, but most of the time those are fibroadenomas or very small cystic lesions with maybe some inflammatory changes. They are usually BIRATS 3. And BIRATS 4 and above, we have to be very careful whether that is malignant or benign. So if we talk about BIRATS 4, 5, 6, 6 is a proven malignancy. We have done a biopsy, we have done an FNA, it has come out to be malignancy, it's a BIRATS 6 lesion. BIRATS 5 is a very high suspicion of malignancy on ultrasound. You will see very high vascularity, irregular margins, spiculated margins is BIRATS 5. And when we come to BIRATS 4, that is further divided into 4A, 4B, 4C. 4C has a higher proportion to malignancy. 4A has a higher proportion to benign. So all the intraductal papillomas, ductal ectasias, they come under BIRATS 4A. And 4B is again, midway when the radiologist is not sure whether it is more towards benign or more towards malignant. So any patient that comes to you with a BIRATS 4 and above ultrasound imaging, please get a sampling done. Whether you get an FNA done if you are in a resource-stricken place, and if not, always get a biopsy done. So even a 2 mm, 3 mm lesion that you can see in ultrasound can be biopsied, which need not be FNA'd because there's a lot of things that FNAC will not tell you, but biopsy will. So the first image is of a normal mammogram that you can see. There is no mass lesion. The second one that you can see it's a very well-defined oval. The one image that I showed you, number B, which was very well-defined oval. So this is basically a benign cyst. It's not very nicely being shown. The third image is, can you see some dot areas which is zoomed? So those are those calcifications. Now calcifications are also multiple types. There's some benign calcifications, some malignant calcifications. If you see very small micro calcifications are more towards malignancies, and you must have read about popcorn calcifications. So those are big calcifications, yes, those are all benign calcifications. And the last one where you can see there is some distorted symmetry. There is a tumor and the rest of the parenchyma is a little distorted. You can see this whitish hue. So they are all basically breast cancer, a malignant tumor. So like we said, ultrasonography is the best test in women less than 35 years of age. It would be 40 considering our population. So it is primarily done to differentiate solid to cystic lesions because mammogram cannot very well differentiate solid to cystic lesions, because this second image on the mammogram, this could also be a fibroadenoma and not a cyst. Yes, it is always performed with a mammography correlation, and it is better to perform less than 40 years, but any patient coming to you even after 40 years with a mammogram, always get an ultrasound done. If you just do a mammogram, not an ultrasound, then the scoring of the BIRATS becomes 0. That is, you are unable to interpret it completely because the ultrasound imaging was missing. Like we say, how it looks like benign. They are usually smooth, well circumscribed margins, and the malignant has irregular margins. The benign ones look hyperechogenic or hypoechogenic. When we talk about hypoechogenic, usually the ultrasound background is white. If it looks black, it is called as hypo, and if it looks lighter, it is hyper. So that is based on your ultrasound waves. Malignant is most of the time hypoechoic, most of the time. See, with malignancy, nothing can be ruled out. Okay, nothing, you cannot say that always you will get hypoechoic. Sometimes you might get hyperechoic. So you have to be very, very cautious with breast cancer because the incidence is rising very, very fast, and it is rising manifold. You'll see a lot of breast cancer patients nowadays. So with a breast tumor in a female, do not take it very lightly. Now what is posterior acoustic shadowing? So it can be seen only on ultrasound, where we see that a tumor is there and we can see some shadow posteriorly. So if there is a malignant tumor, we can see this posterior acoustic shadowing. Now this is a very important thing. You'll see if it's a fibroadenoma in an ultrasound, you'll see it is wider more than taller. Like if you see the ultrasound image, the tumor will look wide. The width will be more than the height. But if you see a malignant lesion will always be taller on an ultrasound more than wider. So though the tumor may be 5 centimeter, but you'll always see that it is taller, that the width, its height is much more than the width. So it could be maybe 5 by 3 centimeter, with 5 centimeter being the height. Now, what are the other imaging modalities? Anybody? This I'll ask you only. What are the other imaging modalities that we can do with breast? Can we do a CT? Will we get anything in CT? So it's MRI. So MRI is usually done with contrast. So when we put a contrast, we can see the vascularity of few lesions. But MRI is indicated in very less number of cases. Anybody knows what are the indications of MRI in breast? Louder? It's okay. Doesn't matter. Scar. What kind of scar? It's okay. It doesn't matter. No, so there are very few specific indications for MRI. A is if it's a lobular carcinoma. Anybody, why for lobular carcinoma are we doing an MRI? So patient comes to you with a 3 centimeter tumor on one side. We have done a biopsy and we've got an invasive lobular carcinoma. Would you like to do an MRI? We will do an MRI. Why? So though the mammogram and the ultrasound have said there is nothing on the contralateral side, lobular cancers have a very high tendency for having a contralateral breast cancer. So you'll always do an MRI because MRI can pick up very, very small subcentimetric tumors as well, micro tumors as well. So you have to do an MRI to rule out that the patient does not have a contralateral lobular cancer. So that is the first indication. Any other indication? Yes, breast implant. If the patient has a breast implant, you cannot do a mammogram. You cannot squeeze the implant. You have to do an MRI. Third indication. Like I said, if the patient only has an axillary tumor, there is nothing on the breast. Patient comes to you with an axillary tumor, axillary node which is big. We have done a biopsy. It's come out to be ductal carcinoma. But on ultrasound and mammogram, we found nothing in the ipsilateral breast. So then we'll do an MRI breast because we need to rule out occult metastasis. There might be a very small tumor in the same side of the breast, which the mammogram and ultrasound has not picked up. So that's the third indication. So first is lobular, second is implant, third is occult metastasis, fourth is MRI in very young patients. So if it's a 20-25-year-old lady complaining of multiple things, she has multiple cysts, she has a lot of discomfort, she's into pain, excruciating pain, not relieved by any painkillers, then we'll do an MRI and not a mammogram, because in that dense breast we'll not be able to see anything on mammogram, but MRI will tell us what the problem is. And there's one last indication for MRI, which I think none of you will know, but it is basically in those BRCA1, BRCA2 positive patients who are unwilling to go for a mastectomy, so they are kept under high risk screening with MRI. So there are 5 indications. One is lobular. So any lobular cancer you get, please get an MRI done for a contralateral breast. Occult metastasis where there is nothing in the ipsilateral breast. Implant with mastectomy, without mastectomy, to look for contractures, to look for ruptures. Fourth was any genetic implications, and the fifth was dense breast in young patients. Like I said, and yeah, recurrent infection, discharge, patient is coming to you all the time, there is no relief, we do a MRI. So in a breast cancer patient, when do we do a PET scan? And what is a PET scan? Anybody knows the full form of PET scan? Yes. So when do we do a PET scan? Which dye does PET scan use? Sorry? But which dye does it use? So usually a dye is given. Yeah, 18 FDG. FDG stands for? Correct. So what happens, a tumor takes up that dye and that can be seen on PET scan. So when do we advise PET scan to a breast cancer patients? Do we advise PET scan to everybody? So patient comes to you with a 1 centimeter tumor, nothing in the nodes, PET scan is not required. So from stage 2B onwards, we get a PET scan done. So if the patient has T1N0, T2N0, that means it has not gone to the nodes, we don't need a PET scan. But if it is T1N1, T2N1, anything stage 2B and above, we get a PET scan done. Now, it can be that a patient with T1N0, T2N0 also has metastasis, but you have not got a PET scan done. So that is called a skip metastasis, where the breast cancer has skipped the axillary node and gone to the different parts of the body. That's a skip metastasis seen only in 2 to 3% of the cases. So stage 2B and lower, don't do a PET scan. But if you're in a private practice, you want to safeguard yourself, it is your choice whether you want to do a PET or not. So PET scan is used for staging and metastatic workup. It is not for the treatment per se. PET scan will not tell us the tumor size. We are not bothered about the tumor size. We will not be operating based on the PET scan. We'll be operating based on our mammogram ultrasound. That's mainly for staging, because the moment the patient is metastatic, the plan of treatment for breast cancer completely changes. And there's one more thing that we can do now. Suppose you are in a periphery area where PET scan is not available. So what you can do is you can get a CT scan, whole abdomen and thorax done, and along with that you can get a bone scan done. So if your examiner is asking you what test would you like to do, in my center I don't have PET scan. So what would you like to do? So we'll do a CT abdomen, CT thorax along with a bone scan. Though it gives you almost proper information, but definitely PET scan would be better than all these three modalities, because like I mentioned, see, PET scan will give you an idea about the marrow metastasis and lytic lesion, which bone scan will not be able to give you that very well. Okay, so now the patient has come to you, again the same lady, 45-year-old lady, 3 centimeter tumor, node negative. We have done a mammogram ultrasound which is collaborating. It is saying it's a BI-RADS 5 lesion, 3 centimeter in size. The axillary nodes are non-pathological, that is fatty hilum is maintained and the cortex is not thickened. We have not done a PET scan, or maybe let's see, we have done a PET scan, some other doctor has got a PET scan done and the PET scan has come as non-metastatic. What tissue diagnosis would you like to do? How would you know whether it is cancer or not? Anybody? Core needle biopsy. Would you not like to do an FNSC? Why? FNSC? What margin? How will you know the margins? It's a biopsy. Excision biopsy or a core biopsy? Core biopsy. So anyway, in core biopsy, we don't know margins because we'll just take out a piece of the tissue. Have you seen core biopsy in the OPD? Anybody has done it? Seen it? Okay. So see, there are two differences. One is FNSC, which is done using a syringe. We just take out, it's cytology. It's not tissue sampling, it's cytology. And a breast biopsy, core biopsy is a tissue sampling. So a lot of places, patients just do FNSC, doctors just do FNSC where biopsy is not available and they go ahead with treatment. But now with the breast lump, there is no role of FNSC in case of breast lump. There's only a role of core biopsy. Because when we do a core biopsy, there are multiple things that we know which FNSC does not tell us. A is the invasion to the basement membrane. Second is IHCs. The ER/PR positive and the HER2 IHCs won't be known if we are just doing an FNSC. And there are few more things that FNSC does not tell us, like the lymphovascular invasion, which core biopsy tells us. So these are the types of biopsies, the advantages and the disadvantages. So FNSC is easy, it is available everywhere, it is relatively cheap. So patients would obviously offer, they'll be more ready to get an FNSC than a biopsy. It's a very small needle. Core needle requires a proper BARD gun, which is a biopsy gun. It is being given by a company called the BARD, which we use a 14 gauge needle, which is quite thick needle. And the last is an excisional biopsy. But see, if you're seeing a BI-RADS 5 lesion, patient has a big tumor which is 99% malignant, you should not go for an excision biopsy. Because a breast lump always needs to be treated along with the axilla. Whether you do a sentinel lymph node biopsy or an axillary clearance, you have to do it in the same sitting. You cannot do an excision biopsy, then that report will come out to be breast cancer and then you will go and do an axillary clearance. It is always to be done together. So always get a biopsy or an FNSC done. I would recommend to do biopsy all the time. Do not go for an FNSC, because nowadays breast cancer treatment solely depends on the biopsy report. It depends upon the IHCs on the ER/PR HER2 status. See, these are not important. So now the patient, we did a biopsy and it has come out to be invasive ductal carcinoma grade 3. And it's a 3 centimeter tumor, node negative, PET scan is non-metastatic. What would be the TNM staging? So breast, it's very simple. T1 is any tumor less than 2 centimeter. T2 is 2 to 5 centimeter. T3 is 5 centimeter beyond. T4A, T4B, T4C are separate. So T4A is extension to the chest wall. T4B has very three particular things, that is pudy orange, second is ulceration, and third is any satellite nodules on the skin. Satellite nodules and satellite lesions seen on mammograms are two different things. Satellite nodules are nodules that you can feel on the skin, and satellite lesions are something that you see on ultrasound. So satellite lesions are not T4B, only satellite nodules. Basically, involvement of the skin is T4B, and T4C is both T4A and T4B. And T4D is inflammatory carcinoma, very rare. We don't see a lot here, but yes, it is there. And node is N0 is when the nodes are negative, N1 is when we find 1, 2, 3 node positive, N2 is more than that, N3 is when we see nodes positive in the SCF, and metastatic is when we see metastasis to any part of the body. So that is a TNM staging. So this you can read. Yeah, I think that is it. So thank you. Maybe management of the breast lump we can do it later, but this was basically how to approach a breast lump. So a patient comes to you in a OPD with breast lump, how would you approach? So any questions, please feel free to ask. No questions? Or should I give you a case scenario? What would you do? Okay, chalo, let me only ask you. So a 30-year-old lady comes to you with a 6 centimeter lump. You've examined, it is soft, firm, it is multiple lobulated. You've done an ultrasound for her, which they have shown it's a BIRAS 3 lesion, 6 centimeter in size, node negative. How would you approach this patient? Anybody? What would you do next? Will you just tell her, go, I don't know what to do? Or will you do something else? Triple assessment, I have told you. What is it? I have done part of the triple assessment. Patient comes to you, 30-year-old lady. She has a 6 centimeter lobulated lump. Ultrasound says it's a BIRAS 3 lesion, which is lobulated, 6 centimeter in size. What would you do next? Yes. No. Six centimeter. Patient has a 6 centimeter lump. She is a B cup size breast with a 6 centimeter lump. Yes. Yes, so see, because it's a 6 centimeter lump, okay, it could be a phyllodes tumor. Now the radiologist might have said BIRAS 3, it could be BIRAS 4A. So you have to apply your own brains because it's a 6 centimeter tumor. You cannot just leave it in a 30-year-old lady, right? You have to remove it. But before removing it, you have to know whether it's a fibroadenoma or it's a phyllodes tumor. Malignancy is ruled out. But even in the benign case, if it's a phyllodes tumor, phyllodes are also three different types. There is benign, there is borderline, and there is malignant. So benign phyllodes is similar to benign fibroadenoma. But the borderline and the malignant phyllodes tumor needs margins along with it. So you need to know it prior before doing an excision. So you do a biopsy, and if it comes out to be fibroadenoma, you do a simple wide local excision of the fibroadenoma. But if it is suppose borderline phyllodes or malignant phyllodes, then you need to take out along with it a 1 centimeter margin, because then the patient might need radiation after it, because then that becomes a sarcoma and not just a benign disease. And sarcoma is actually much more scary compared to the invasive ductal components that we talk about, because sarcomas don't respond much to chemotherapy. We can only radiate them, and the chances of metastasis is extremely high. So always go for a biopsy. Don't go for an FNSC, because if you do an FNSC in this lady, it'll come as fibroadenoma. They'll not be able to differentiate phyllodes from fibroadenoma. So that is what is the role of important of biopsy is. So our older generations had this habit of doing FNSC, because you are the ones who are upcoming. You have to know that FNSC has no role. It only has role if we need to sample one of the axillary lymph nodes to see whether it is positive or negative.